What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we want to react to the New York Giants coaching staff and the fact that Brian Daboll is still here, but who's leaving? Somebody's got to go after the season, right? A 3-14 finish to the season, an absolute disaster all the way around. Brian Daboll somehow keeps his job, but surely he's going to fire somebody on this coaching staff. If you saw John Mara's comments at his end of season presser, well, he kind of indicated that he wanted some firings to take place. First of all, he had a conversation with Brian Daboll about stepping away from the play calling duties. That was pretty eye-opening. Could that lead to changes on the offensive staff? Perhaps. Or how about on the defensive side of the ball? John Mara said that he is sick and tired of watching teams drive up and down the field against the Giants defense. That kind of sounded like John Mara, if anything, wants Shane Bowen fired. So will Shane Bowen get fired? Will there be changes on the offensive side of the staff? Mike Kafka's interviewing for a couple of head coaching jobs, so that's pretty interesting. Could he make a lateral move to a different OC job? Will he get an HC job? Those are some things to consider. And then also, how about the fact that, well, the New York Giants quarterbacks do not develop, and they all suck ever since Shea Tierney was hired. So should there be a change at the quarterbacks coach position? Those are the three guys that we want to discuss in this episode and talk about should the Giants make any coaching changes. So we'll go ahead and dive into all that. Before we do, though, Wednesday, 6 p.m. every single week for the rest of the offseason. Catch me live on the Bleacher Report app. Just going to go ahead and plug that real quick. Tonight is the first episode, 6 p.m. Eastern. Go over to Bleacher Report, and you can see me. I'm doing a 30-minute live stream discussing the New York Giants and previewing the offseason. So I'm very excited about that. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? What are your thoughts on the New York Giants coaching staff, and who do you think should get fired?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And listen, the first guy I want to talk about is Shane Bowen. Now, I know there's a lot of narratives going out about this Giants defense, and obviously, let's get one thing clear: having a bottom tier offense does not help your defense, right? However, the one thing that Wink Martindale's defense had going for it, they created a lot of turnovers, and it allowed the offense to at least help. And I wouldn't even say help. It didn't help much, but at least be on the field more than we expect. So the turnovers was a nice kind of consolation prize for what was a spotty defense. Now, John Mara came out during his press conference 2 days ago and said, I'm getting tired of watching other teams go up and down the field against our defense. I mean, yeah, Shane Bowen's probably getting fired after that. I think that's probably a pretty good indication. Everyone's kind of pointing to Shane Bowen like you're the guy that is not doing a good job. And I'll give him a bit of credit in the sense that we saw some individual standout performances. I mean, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, those guys are just individually talented. I don't give Shane Bowen much credit for making great players perform great. That's what they do. That's what they're paid to do. However, we did see developmental regression in about every single player you could imagine. That wasn't a rookie. You saw it in Deonte Banks. I mean, who else is really there that that is a second-year player that we have any faith in? I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau's kind of middling. He has good games, he has bad games. We saw, obviously, Andrew Phillips looked excellent when he was healthy. Tyler Nubin was up and down. He was a great run stopper, but teams were not throwing the ball against us because they didn't need to. They just ran against us. And here's the thing, Anthony. For Shane Bowen to come from a Titans defense that was top 5 in run defense and then go to a Giants defense that this year could not stop a nosebleed, I don't understand how that happens. I don't think the Giants were that poor in terms of their personnel. Yeah, we probably needed another DT, but you had Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, you had Dexter Lawrence, Bobby Okereke, and Micah McFadden. How could you not stop the run at an adequate level with those guys? I don't know. Shane Bowen's defense clearly did not do a good enough job, and the secondary was a complete disaster. Whether it be Deonte Banks' regression, Adoree Jackson as a last-second addition. And listen, I'm not going to blame Shane Bowen for all of that. That's roster construction, and that's Joe Shane's job. So what I do think is that the Giants need to bring in somebody who's going to command respect and get some of these young guys in a better situation to develop long-term. Deonte Banks is too good of a prospect in terms of what his tangible traits are. He's too fast, too athletic, too much talent to fail. He's the type of player that goes to another team and has a resurrected career. That's Deonte Banks. If you wanted to create a player in a lab that is a reclamation project for another team that would end up becoming great, if he went to the Lions, I would be willing to bet anything he'd end up becoming a very good cornerback. The Giants need to find a DC who's going to emphasize progression in talent and focus on youth. And Anthony, I'll let you get your take in here before we dive into some options that could make sense for the Giants, because we do think Shane Bowen is on the outs.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, obviously, I think Shane Bowen's on his way out. I'm not thrilled with Shane Bowen. Don't think he did a great job this past season. So I'm fine moving on from him. But you mentioned they need to find somebody who's a leader, somebody who can focus on the progression of these players. But who would that be? That's the big question. And that's what I want to immediately ask you. But first and foremost, I do want to take a look at something because you're talking about great defensive minds and coordinators who can step in and spark development overnight. There is nobody on the Los Angeles Chargers defense who is playing worse this year than they did last year. What Jesse Minter did with that defense as a defensive coordinator over in Los Angeles, absolutely spectacular. And that is why I am over here looking at BetUS, and I'm taking a look at these lines for Saturday's Super Wildcard Weekend game between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Houston Texans. And Alex, am I tripping, or is over 21.5 points for the Los Angeles Chargers way too low? I mean, they've put up at least 30 points in each of their last 3 games. They had 40 points 2 weeks ago. They blew out the Raiders last week, and I know it's the Raiders, but hey, they had a lot of points against a very good Denver Broncos defense. Against the Houston Texans, it is on the road, and I understand Houston can be a noisy environment to play in, but I really like over 21.5 points for the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert is absolutely cooking lately. Lad McConkey is a young stud, and Quentin Johnston just had his coming out game last week. So I like over 21.5 points at minus 130 over on BetUS. I'm going to go ahead, throw $10 down, and hopefully this Saturday I get to watch my Bolts get a win, and I get to win a little bit of cash from this bet. So guys, make sure you go check out BetUS. Use code YouTube150 for a 150% deposit match up to $2,000. BetUS, the sportsbook with the fastest payouts in the industry. Go ahead and check it out, and also go Bolts. Now back into the New York Giants discussion on defensive coordinator. Here's the thing. We've seen a lot of names get brought to the table over the past few days on social media. Obviously, I think all Giants fans unanimously are ready to move on from Shane Bowen. It doesn't seem like anybody cares about this guy. It doesn't seem like anybody wants him here. If Brian Daboll wants him here, okay, that's just another indictment on Brian Daboll. Because it seems like all Giants fans are ready. They saw one and done, just ready to move on from Shane Bowen. The defense regressed in many ways. It seemed like the grass wasn't greener after Wink Martindale left. Now, what's the next option here? I'm going to throw out a couple names, Alex, and I just want to get rapid fire your take on these guys. First and foremost, Antonio Pierce, former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, former Super Bowl winning linebacker for the New York Giants. Somebody had to comment in my DMs today on Twitter to just argue with me for no reason, said that he's never been a defensive coordinator. That's not true. He's never been a defensive coordinator at the NFL level. He has been at the collegiate level, and he was a damn good one, which is why he made the jump to the NFL and quickly became an interim and then full-time head coach. So Antonio Pierce does have experience running a defense. Clarify that. In the NFL level, he's been a linebackers coach and now a head coach. He was fired, I think, unfairly by the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he deserved another year as their head coach, but nevertheless, he is now available for teams to consider as an assistant or coordinator coach. Alex, what's your take on Antonio Pierce? Do you like him as a potential DC candidate for the New York Giants, or would you prefer somebody with a little bit more experience than what Antonio Pierce can provide?
I mean, it's a great question. And like you said, people are out there right now saying Antonio Pierce doesn't have any experience calling plays. Guys, play calling is just, like, how can I say, if you have a great playbook and you have a great system, the play calling is just the factor in that. You know what I mean? If Antonio Pierce comes to the table and says, this is the defense I want to run. I want to maximize your pass rushers. I want to maximize your aggressive cornerbacks. I want Deontay Banks to stop being a little P and be aggressive as a CB. Try to get interceptions. Be aggressive. Use his instincts. Use that athletic profile. He played so much just conservative play style this past season. Deontay Banks is meant to be a dog, man. Like, Deontay Banks is meant to be aggressive. He's meant to undercut routes. We saw Trayvon Diggs do it for years before that ACL injury. Of course, this year was his rebound. But, like, Banks needs to be an aggressive corner. Banks needs to be confident. The Giants stripped that man's confidence down to the bare bone. What I like about Antonio Pierce, that dude knows how to lead men. That dude knows how to be a freaking leader. The Giants need leaders in that locker room, not play callers. They need freaking leaders. And the Giants lack leadership. Antonio Pierce is going to be one of those guys that steps in and everyone is going to rally around him. Why? Because he has a history in the NFL. The guy's played the game, right? He knows how to manage NFL players. He just was a head coach. He knows how to, like, imagine going from being a head coach where you're managing a team and now you just manage a unit, or just a group of guys. I think that's a lot more simplified, and he will be a lot better at that. The play calling, I don't care. People saying, "Oh, he doesn't have the experience to be a play caller." Well, I'll tell you something right now. I want to know who has experience playing as a play caller who's absolutely dog crap? Shane Bowen. I don't want to hear anything. Half of you guys are like, I want Ben Johnson as our offensive coordinator, head coach. That guy's never been a head coach before. It's the same concept of like going from OC or DC to head coach. Oh, they've never been a head coach before. How do you know they're going to succeed? So if you think in that logic, you also have to think of the logic of, oh, if this guy has never called plays before, but he knows how to run a defense, he commands respect, people will understand what he's trying to do, and he can teach the game because he's played the game. You have to give a guy like that a chance. Play calling, it's just a process in the game, right? The play calling is literally just momentum based. You're calling it based on this look, that look, what another team is doing. You game plan these things the week prior, right? If he has a good system, a good scheme, and he can maximize talent, I'm not really concerned about the play calling. That's like the last thing I'm considering right now from a DC perspective.
Yeah, I do think you make a really good point here with fans who might be concerned about Antonio Pierce's lack of experience. Shane Bowen was a defensive coordinator who made a lateral move to be the New York Giants' next defensive coordinator. He had the prerequisite experience that Giants fans yearned for, and it did nothing. He was a worse DC than the one that we just had. Obviously, Wink Martindale has more experience and has always been a great defensive coordinator across several teams, including the Baltimore Ravens, of course. But when he left, the Giants wanted another experienced defensive coordinator, so they went with Shane Bowen. Maybe this time around, do the opposite approach. Don't go with another defensive coordinator who's going to be here for 2 years or less. Go with a new guy, some fresh blood, somebody who can bring a new perspective. And I think most important, and you kind of touched on this, Alex, somebody who can cultivate a mentality and lead a group of men, because that's really what defense, you need that kind of mentality where you are a group, you are a unit, you are not individuals playing. I don't know if you saw Hard Knocks, the AFC North edition, Alex, but I saw Mike Tomlin and some of his assistant coaches speaking to his players, and he was coaching them and saying, we are not playing as individuals, we need to play as a unit. Pittsburgh has had a great defense for how long? Ever since Michael Tomlin's been there. He's been there for 18 years. They've never had a losing season. A lot of that is because he creates a unity, a unified front on the offensive and especially the defensive side of the ball. That's what the New York Giants need from their next DC. Somebody who gets these guys to stop playing as individuals, because personally, that's what I see oftentimes in this defense. I think in 2022, one of the things that helped us have such a successful season, one of the things that Wink Martindale did very well, he had those guys playing as a unit. I didn't see, especially on the defensive line, I didn't see individuals. I saw a team, and I think that's really important. So if Antonio Pierce steps in there for an interview and he kind of pitches a vision of a unified front and having this team play like a group on the defensive side of the ball, sign me up. I don't care about necessarily the play calling as being the biggest factor. I think it is important and it does matter. Being able to situationally call a defense is very important. But it's also just, in my opinion, paramount to create a unified structure on the defensive side of the ball. And that's something that I do believe Antonio Pierce is capable of doing. So that's why I think he would be an intriguing candidate. However, there are other candidates. There are guys, like if you do want experience, well, Robert Saleh is out there. Do I think he would come back to New York? No. So I don't think he's actually going to be a realistic option for the Giants. No, he wasn't with the Giants. He was with the Jets, but I don't think he wants to be in this media market. They didn't treat him too well on his way out of the Jets facilities. But if there's other names out there, Alex, who might you be looking at? If there's somebody who kind of catches your eye defensively as a DC, I know the options aren't necessarily fruitful this time around, which is why we could see the Giants just stick with Shane Bowen, or maybe they go with somebody else in-house and an internal hiring could be possible, whether that's an Andre Patterson, a Jerome Henderson. Those are some assistant coaches that they have who have served in co-coordinator capacities in the past. Maybe they could co-coordinate the defense together, those two guys, if they want to maintain continuity. I'm just curious if you have any ideas. Maybe it's not an idea of who you want to be the defensive coordinator, but if you have an idea of how you want the defense to look. Mine, I think we all know. I want more zone coverage. I think our personnel is not matched well for man coverage. Deontay Banks has always struggled in man, even at Maryland. Get into a zone-heavy defense that blitzes and takes the pressure off of individuals doing a job. Make it a more cohesive unit. And I think you do that through zone defense, which is what the best defenses in the NFL do at the highest level. So, Alex, if there's any specific names that you want to throw out there or specific kind of a look to the defense that you have in mind, I'm curious to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the names that pops up is Lou Anarumo, and why he's interesting is because he actually was with the Giants back in 2018. He was the defensive backs coach for us, and then went to the Bengals in 2019. He has been a DC for a AFC Championship game. I mean, he held the Chiefs to a field goal in the second half, according to Wikipedia, and they went to overtime in that game. They lost because it's just you can't stop KC sometimes. And when you are obviously the Bengals coming off a season where the defense was really, really suspect. They just didn't have much talent. Like, they really just don't have that much. The offense really picked them up. Anarumo is a season. I mean, if you want someone that's experienced, if you want an experienced play caller, a guy that's been to the playoffs multiple times, like, he's a guy that you might look for. Like, he knows how to run a defense. He's coming off a bad season, so he may have to adjust some things and tweak some stuff, but he has been with the Giants. He is from Staten Island, so if you wanted to convince him to come here, probably wouldn't be that difficult. I imagine he has a lot of family in the area, so if Lou Anarumo is someone like you're like, I don't want Antonio Pierce, he's inexperienced, I don't want to deal with that. Lou Anarumo is probably your next best option because he does. I mean, obviously, I'd prefer Robert Saleh, but as referenced, the 49ers have reportedly offered him a defensive coordinator job already, and he's going to take that instead of coming back to the Giants. I mean, why would you ever pass that up? I mean, the 49ers they had a lot of injuries this year. They were in a bad spot, but I mean, the fact that he was even it's kind of crazy to me sometimes, Anthony, because I heard like people saying, oh, like I think that the 49ers or like Kyle Shanahan was on the hot seat. And they're like, oh, we're bringing back Kyle Shanahan. I'm like, was that even really a conversation? Like, was Kyle Shanahan really even on the hot seat? Like, Brian Dable is not being fired, but like Kyle Shanahan's being considered a hot seat head coach? No freaking way. Like, obviously they kept them. They were really dealt a bad blow. IU getting hurt. Obviously Debo was hurt a good portion of the year. McCaffrey's been out all year. Their defense is shredded with injuries too. And Saleh going over there, it's in his best interest. He's not going to come to the Giants over that if the 49ers really do have that job vacant for him. So you're really looking at Antonio Pierce, who, is inexperienced, but he knows how to lead guys, and he is a player. He was a player, and a damn good one. And talk about restoring culture, Anthony. I think John Mara probably looks at AP and is like, he was part of what made the Giants the Giants. He's part of what made this organization truly elite, and I think Mara probably wants to bring some of that nostalgia back. So if it's up to him, he may push the needle in that direction, I think.
You're right. That's why I probably don't want Antonio Pierce as the defensive coordinator. I am really tired of this team falling into the trap of thinking back on the glory days and getting nostalgic and making their decisions for their franchise based on nostalgia. That has been the problem for the New York Giants. And I've gone over this many times in my opinions of this, the family business mentality and the way that they hire from within all the time. And they only bring guys in if Bill Belichick gives a stamp of approval or if Bill Parcells had some sort of working relationship with the guy. Need to cut yourself off from these trees and start over again. That's what the New York Giants need to do. The old Giants way is dead. Let it die, let it rest, and create a new Giants way. So, listen, I think Antonio Pierce would be a great coach, and I think he is a phenomenal leader, and he did have a lot of success with the New York Giants. I loved Antonio Pierce when he was in his playing days with the New York Giants. But if that hiring indicates that John Mara is still making decisions based on looking into the past and trying to recapture what once was, then I don't want that hiring because we can't be looking into the past anymore. The NFL has changed. The New York Giants have changed. The fans have changed. And the way that the game is played has drastically changed. The New York Giants need to adapt because that's what you do. You adapt or you die. And the Giants have been dead on the table for 10 years now because they refuse to adapt. Let's move on. That's how I feel about it. And hey, again, if they hire Antonio Pierce, I probably will praise it because I do think he is a good coach. But I would really prefer that the Giants get out of this tree and get out of this stuck in the past mindset, look forward and build a new future. That's what I'm hoping to see them do. So I don't know exactly who that candidate is. It's not Lou Anarumo because he was with the Giants in the past as well. But find somebody new. That was one of the things, Alex. We praised Brian Dable so much because when he was hired, he brought in Mike Kafka and Wink Martindale as his OC and DC. He had zero connections personally to those guys, and the Giants had zero connections personally to those guys. And the Giants had a lot of success in 2022, in large part, I think, because of those two guys. Do that again. Stop with the connection hirings. Go back into picking guys who are the most qualified and most talented for the position. That's what the Giants did in 2022. That's why they found success. And that's what I hope they do in 2025. If they do make a change at DC, just bring in the best guy, not the guy that the people in the building are most familiar with, not the guy that has the Belichick seal of approval. Just bring in the best guy for the position. So I don't know who that is. Again, I would look around. I would definitely, we mentioned LA earlier, I would look for an assistant on that coaching staff immediately because that defense plays so good and they are so great at progressing and developing players. So I would definitely look at LA and I would look at a lot of other defenses, but I wouldn't look at guys who have connections to the New York Giants because I'm tired of looking into the past and hoping to recreate that in an ever-changing future of football. So now let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball, Alex, unless you did have something else to add there.
I was just going to say, like, I don't like going into the past, but if it's going to help us do better than what we currently have in the present, I'm not opposed to it. Like, the alternatives are slim to a lot of degrees because the Giants aren't an attractive destination right now, so you really have to take what you can get. So if AP is willing to come here, I'm considering it. But let's talk about the offense and Mike Kafka and Shea Tierney, current OC, who is assistant head coach and still getting head coaching opportunities, to say the least. I don't think Kafka's a realistic opportunity, but you never know, I guess.
Yeah, I want to share my take on that, and it ties into something that I spoke on a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing New York Giants free agents, and I said that the Giants for the last few years have demonstrated that they struggle to properly evaluate their talent in-house, and that extends to the free agents and the players on the roster, but it also extends into the coaching staff, in my opinion. I think there have been several Giants coaching members who have left to go to other organizations and have found more success. Davis Webb being one of them. I think actually the greatest example of this, Alex, Steve Spagnuolo. He is arguably the best defensive coordinator in the last 20 years of NFL history. He is a multi-Super Bowl champion with the Giants and now the Kansas City Chiefs. He doesn't get enough head coaching job interviews. He's getting a couple this cycle, which I think is well-deserved. That's the guy that the Giants probably should have hired back in 2016 when they moved on from Tom Coughlin. I think he was there. I know he was the interim head coach, I think, in 2017. Steve Spagnuolo should still be here. That's the guy, if you want to look into the past. That was the mistake, was letting that man leave this building. Steve Spagnuolo should not be on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Giants should have kept him. But I'll digress off that and just say that speaks to my larger point. The Giants, for a long time, last 10 years, I would say, all of the free agents who leave and then have a better career elsewhere, all the coaches who leave and have a better career elsewhere, they don't know how to evaluate their in-house talent on both the football field and on the sidelines. So that's the point that I would make and the argument that I would make. I think that Mike Kafka is viewed around the league in a much higher regard than how the New York Giants and the New York Giants fans view him. I think we have a pretty low opinion of him because of the way that the offense has performed, and that's rightful. And I think the Giants have a low opinion of him because of the way the offense has performed, and they're sick and tired of having a bad offense, and they're looking for somebody to shoulder the blame. Whether that's Dable or Kafka or a combination, they're looking for somebody to blame. And I think that Kafka's receiving a lot of that blame, but I don't think teams around the league are blaming Kafka. I think they just look at Brian Dable and say it's his fault. So I think that Kafka is considered a very bright offensive mind. You have to remember this is a guy who came to the Giants with a huge vote of confidence from Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. There are teams around the NFL who probably view him in a very high light and think he is a rising star coach. So that's the point that I want to make on Kafka, Alex, but I know that we're pretty much ready to move on from Kafka as well, so I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I just wanted to make that point and kind of hear your take on it. We're in agreement that the Giants struggle to evaluate the talent that they have in-house. Do you think that Mike Kafka might be one of those guys who leaves here and has a greater successful career elsewhere?
Probably. I mean, right now, I don't think that the Giants have much of a leg to stand on. I mean, John Mara said he wants Brian Dable to give up play calling, and Dable acknowledged that he had spoken in their press conference, or rather in their meeting before the press conference, about that topic exactly. So Kafka's role on this team has been buried, right? At the moment, he's the assistant head coach. It just really was a moniker they gave him to hide the fact that they were stripping his responsibilities. He went from being a play caller to just kind of around. He just was probably helping build the offensive scheme for that week, or rather the play calls, or doing some in-depth research on the opposition to determine where they were weak, where they could take advantage, like stuff that assistants do. He had a better title, but was probably doing assistant level work. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just speaking on based on the fact that he lost play calling duties, and if he lost play calling duties, that means that Brian Dable was doing most of the work preparing for opposing defenses, because you don't call plays unless you understand the opposition. So I think most of what Kafka was doing was probably analyzing and researching to see where there were weaknesses, and then Dable was taking that information and then applying it to the field. Really assistant level work, for being quite honest. So do I think he is better off leaving? Probably. I think there's an incoming situation where we see both sides parted ways, because I think that Kafka, I mean, they asked him last week. They're like, "What's your future with the team?" And you know what he said? "I am under contract for next year, so I'm not sure." You don't say that unless you want to leave, man. The right response, if he wanted to stay, yeah, like, I'm excited for next year. We're gonna, we're looking to compound on the success we had last year. That's stuff that you can live with. But he's like, "Yeah, I'm under contract next year, so I'm not sure." That indicates he just is in prison right now. He's trapped. He can't leave, and he doesn't really know what the future holds. That's not a good thing. So I think if he goes to Brian Dable and he goes to John Mara and Joe Sheen, he's like, I want to go explore my other opportunities, and I'm going to make a ruckus if you don't let me walk. I think they're going to mutually part ways. And I think that the Giants are going to be left trying to find another OC, someone that can just basically do assistant work, unless Brian Dable's open to offloading that responsibility again. The only way Mike Kafka does stay is if the Giants and Brian Dable guarantee that he's going to be calling plays next year. That's the only way I see Mike Kafka staying. And as of right now, I don't get the sense that Dable wants to give up play calling. And Anthony, you might ask why. And the clear and simple answer is they are on the hot seat. They have to succeed. And I don't think Brian Dable's going to be too excited about giving the responsibilities to somebody else when his job is on the line. So I think he wants to stay as the play caller, because he wants, if he gets fired, he wants to do it because he didn't do a good job, not because he put that faith in somebody else. That's why I kind of foresee him maintaining that role and Mike Kafka wanting to leave, because he'll probably get a better opportunity elsewhere, maybe as an OC. But I don't think the Giants are going to let him make a lateral move unless he's a free agent, basically, unless they part ways mutually. So that's an interesting one to keep tabs on. And so I do think the Giants are going to have to make some moves there. With that being said, the available options to replace him, and we haven't even talked about Shea Tierney. I mean, he's a lesser kind of variable in this equation as a quarterback coach, but I mean, the Giants, the quarterback room has been horrible. Drew Lock's not done much. Tommy DeVito obviously is just Tommy DeVito is a UDFA trying to fight his way onto a roster, not even a bad one like the Giants. And then you have Daniel Jones, who didn't pan out. So I just don't really see right now how this progress or how this offseason is going to kind of shake itself out, and the Giants are going to either stay the same or they're going to get better or overhaul the entire assistant offensive kind of front office of that room. I mean, Anthony, is there anyone that you like at OC? Because like right now, if you let Mike Kafka go and a new OC is going to be hired and not get play calling duties, I don't really know who would want to come here. You're really just asking an assistant to come here and not call plays for the most part.
Yeah, I think that you might be doing that, but I also think that Brian Dable is open to giving away the play calling duties once again. I think that John Mara made as much of that clear in his end of season press conference. I think in Dable's end of season conference as well, he at least expressed an openness to that idea, probably because the owner is pressuring him to do that, but still, I think he is open to it, even if it's reluctantly open to it. I think that the Giants, here's what I think they should do offensively. Number one thing, I kind of mentioned this, I think in yesterday's episode, maybe the one prior. Number one guy you get back in this building is Davis Webb. If you can make him your offensive coordinator, you make him your offensive coordinator. He's got the connection with Dable. He loved Brian Dable. Brian Dable loved him. He wouldn't have this job that he has with the Denver Broncos as their quarterbacks coach if not for Brian Dable, if not also for Eli Manning, who also sent a letter of confidence to Sean Payton as well. Everybody in that Giants building absolutely loves Davis Webb. If they want to fix their offense, they want to get a familiar face back in here, Davis Webb would be the guy. Now, again, back to my other argument, I don't want a familiar face. I want all new. I want new blood in here. What I would do if I were the New York Giants, I don't know who the names are. I'd have to go ahead and search them. But I would go into specific coaching trees and try and pluck some coaches out of them. The number one coaching tree that I would look at is the McDaniel coaching tree. Or not the McDaniel, the Shanahan coaching tree. It yielded guys like McDaniel, Miami Dolphins head coach, and others all across the NFL. I want somebody who has the ability to develop quarterbacks and who has the ability to construct a high octane rushing attack. And that is what you see from all Shanahan offenses. They do such a great job of simplifying the game for quarterbacks, and they do such a phenomenal job of utilizing pre-snap and post-snap motion in order to open up easy rushing lanes for the running backs. That is the kind of offense that I would love to see the New York Giants try to replicate. And that is only achievable by leaving your current coaching trees that you've already dabbled in, getting outside, hiring new blood from a new tree that you've never been a part of. Bring that guy in as some fresh blood to the organization. That's what I hope to see the Giants do on offense. I would like to see somebody from the Shanahan coaching tree or from Kevin O'Connell. If you have somebody on the Minnesota staff that you envision as a rising star, go ahead and bring them in. But again, this is all contingent on the New York Giants moving on from Mike Kafka, and I'm not entirely convinced that they will. And I think a lot of that, Alex, has to do with optics. I don't think the Giants want to look like a team that keeps turning over offensive and defensive coordinator positions. They are that team, but I don't think they want to remain that team. And unfortunately, I think that they are going to try and maintain Kafka and Bowen because of optics. And I think that in itself is bad practice. Just get the best guys in here for the jobs and get the other guys who are faltering out. That's what I think the Giants should do, but I don't know if that's what they will do. Shea Tierney goes for him as well. The Giants quarterbacks have been bad. They haven't developed. And if you read about Shea Tierney and Davis Webb was out coaching him in those meetings in 2022. I think the success of those quarterbacks in 2022, of Daniel Jones in 2022, yeah, obviously Dable deserves a lot of credit. Kafka deserves some. I don't know how much Shea Tierney deserves anymore after reading these articles about how Davis Webb was doing most of the coaching in those quarterback meetings. I think that was very eye-opening. So that's what I would reevaluate if I were Brian Dable. I would say, okay, let's explore the market. If we can find the defensive coordinator candidate that we like more than Shane Bowen, let's go ahead, fire Shane Bowen, and hire that guy. But let's do our exploration before we decide on Shane Bowen. That's what I would say. Same thing for the offensive side of the ball, but I would take all three of those guys, Dable, Kafka, and Tierney, and I would put them in a room and I'd have them try to figure out what is our problem. Why are we so bad on offense? What is the true thing that's standing in the way of this team being successful? And then after that evaluation, I would go ahead and do the same thing. Look at some other trees, look at some other candidates, and decide who you're moving forward with. And ultimately, I think if you do that for both sides of the ball, you would decide that moving forward with new blood is the right path. Alex, what's your take on it? Any names that come to mind? Any coaching trees that come to mind? I imagine you as well think that it's... I'll say this, kind of just to segue to your part here, but last point that I want to make. I think that the relationship has soured between Kafka and Brian Dable and the Giants, and for that reason alone, it's best for both parties to probably move on and find new opportunities. So that would be the number one reason that I advocate for the New York Giants finding a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like that relationship has undoubtedly soured. A lot of the coaches have soured with Dable, a lot of his coordinators at this point. So, I do think going out and getting an OC that comes from one of those coaching trees is great, but also maybe like an up-and-coming mind, like someone that's going to bring some spark and creativity. Because the truth is that the Giants, like Dable's offense wasn't all that bad. It's just they didn't have the players. Like the quarterback, the lack of consistency at quarterback was damning. Like they were missing throws left and right. Couldn't get through the reads. The offensive line fell apart. Roster construction, which is Joe Shane's job, and then it just didn't look great. Dable's offense, though, the play calls weren't horrible. I saw open receivers. The Giants just could not get the ball to them. I mean, for God's sakes, everyone knew Neighbors was getting 7 to 8 catches a game at least, and they still couldn't stop the guy. They just really have to find another complementary piece, which is why I'm kind of getting a little bit more on board. If quarterbacks go 1-2 off the board, if it's like a Cam Ward, Sanders, or whatever it might be, I'm getting more comfortable with the idea of taking Travis Hunter 3. If he's there, and just going out and getting a guy that could be a true dual threat. I know a lot of people have him projected as a cornerback at the NFL, but like, could you? I see a world where Travis Hunter is a full-time cornerback, but has designed offensive plays for him. That is the world that I see Travis Hunter in the NFL, where he is a full-time corner, but that dude is a dangerous playmaker on offense too. I think you bring him onto the offensive field sometimes, and you scheme him the ball. And even though teams know, you still can't stop a guy like that. They couldn't stop Neighbors, and they knew he was getting the ball all the time. Travis Hunter's another threat that you have out there that even if he's on the field, it opens up the whole playbook for Neighbors. You know what I mean? Like if Travis Hunter's on the field, opposing teams are like, Well, damn, like how do we stop both these guys? One of those two guys is getting the ball, and you can't stop both of them. So, and then you have underneath guys like Wandale. Maybe you draft a guy like LeJohntay Wester, who I love as a slot guy. There's a lot you can do here. You kill two birds with one stone with Hunter. You have a CB and a WR, and you could use them. You could use him in all sorts of ways, and you could still draft a receiver and feel good about your process. And maybe you take a quarterback in the second round, and then you now you have enough offensive firepower that in 2026 you can mortgage the future to trade up and get a guy. Because this year, I'm seeing tons of mock drafts, Anthony, where there is no quarterbacks going in the top 10. Like I'm seeing mock drafts left and right, like not seeing quarterbacks in the top 10 picks. I don't know what that means, but what I do know is that these quarterbacks are not rated as highly in NFL circles as they are in the media. If one goes top 10, it's going to be, or even if two goes top 10, it'll be because of the draft class and just the need for quarterbacks. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that these guys fall a couple spots. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Cam Ward could be sitting there at 3. Now, we know Rand Carthen loved Cam Ward, apparently. This is the rumors we've seen on social media. We don't know what the new GM is going to want to do. We don't know if they're going to want to say, we don't love this quarterback class. We feel it's better to go get a veteran, restock the roster with blue chip prospects. There's not that many in this draft class. And then go forward. I know a lot of people have mentioned Abdul Carter. There's a whole bunch of Will Johnson slew. If we have 3 and Travis Hunter's on the board, I'm taking Travis Hunter. And that's assuming Cam Ward's already taken. But it's interesting. Like, my brain is all over the place now with this draft. It's so up in the air. But talking about the offensive kind of play calling, I'd love to find an up-and-coming young coach because Brian Daboll's not going to give up all that power on offense. I'd like to have somebody, I don't know who that is, that has a lot of creativity, like is going to bring a creative play style that we can say to somebody, like you're going to interview these guys and say, how would you maximize Malik Neighbors? Right? How would you maximize Neighbors and a Travis Hunter? Maybe we get him in the draft. How would you maximize Tyrone Tracy and his receiving qualities? How would you maximize Wandale out of the slot? How would you use Jalen Hyatt, who's basically Casper the Ghost out there right now and running cardio? And he's like, he doesn't even look like he wants to be there, right? He's like, I don't know, we'll see. He doesn't even want to be here, So this is the situation we look at right now. Or you could even ask a prospective OC, which receiver on the free agent market would you target? What underrated receiver on the free agent market would you target to reinforce this team? Right? Like, there's so many questions you could ask. Obviously, the X's and O's are given. More so, what would you do with the talent or added talent? And, proven OCs, I'm not like looking for a proven Norv Turner style offense OC like a Jason Garrett. I'm looking for a new up and coming coach. I'm looking for someone, and Mike Kafka was that guy, right? Maybe he still could be, but I just think that relationship may have soured enough that it may not be on the docket anymore for us, for him and Brian Daboll. So at this point, I'd love to try to target a young up and coming kind of assistant that can help build creativity into this system, into this scheme, and build creativity around a young quarterback and facilitate a little bit more growth and progressive play calling. Because I do think you look at the way, the Lions, look at the Lions. They are a progressive play calling team. They have elite athleticism. They have elite talent all around, and they maximize the hell out of it. The Giants, they do have some talent. They maximized Neighbors, but it wasn't because of a balanced system. It's because he was the only guy that could do anything, or they could maximize and with his talent. I don't know. I just feel like they should get someone young, up and coming, that can add some creativity to this offense and kind of devise some unique styles around Brian Daboll, who I don't think is going to give up power on offense this upcoming season.
I don't know, though. I think he still could. Just because he had that conversation with Merritt, I think it is a possibility. But I'm not exactly sure how this is going to unfold. We have to see whether or not the Giants make any of these firings first and foremost. But I think you guys kind of get the point. We're ready to move on from these coordinators and start over. We were ready to move on from everybody. Clean house and just do it all over again. So if we're not going to be able to do that, since the Giants are choosing to retain Daboll and Shane, well, let's at least make some other changes to the coaching staff to try and spark some sort of a change and a renewal on both sides of the ball. Because the Giants, they were a bad team all around. It wasn't just the offense this year. It wasn't just the defense. Both sides of the ball struggled mightily, and both sides of the ball need to improve in 2025. So how do you make those changes? How do you get those sides of the ball playing at a higher level? you probably need some coaching staff changes, some new blood in here. So whatever the Giants do, of course, we're going to be excited to discuss it whenever it happens. If they fire Bowen, we'll talk about that. If they fire Kafka, we'll talk about that. Don't think they're going to fire Kafka just because he is getting so many interviews for other jobs. I think they're quietly hoping he gets one of those jobs, especially if it's a head coaching job. The New York Giants would get 2 third-round picks in return because he is from Puerto Rican descent. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But for the New York Giants, I think they are eager to move on from those guys. It's just about the timing and the options. I don't think the Giants had a lot of options outside of Dable, which is why they stuck with Dable. I'm not sure how many options they're going to have if they move on from Bowen or if they move on from Kafka. This is a little bit of a sinking ship, I think, is the perception. So not a lot of coaches are looking to jump onto the sinking ship and basically go down with it. And as a result, the Giants might have to stick with their entire coaching staff for the 2025 season and not make any major changes, which is a little bit scary in and of itself. But of course, any changes that they do make, we'll be breaking down right here on Fireside Giants, which is presented to you by BetUS. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. Listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.